For many centuries, London was a dangerous place. It was a magnet for the very worst kind of people. Jack the Ripper dominated the headlines, but he wasn't the only killer around. Murder was afoot. The fear of death was everywhere. But police had their work cut out to track the culprits down. In this series, we'll be investigating some of the city's most notorious and intriguing crimes.
The female defendant.
Sexual intrigue, vicious murder, as well as the latest technology, fed the nation's insatiable desire for gruesome stories of London's dark side. In the early 20th century, all was not well on the continent. Tensions were mounting across Europe and revolutionary movements were forming. Many of the most ardent revolutionaries were sent into exile, and London was one of the few places where they were welcome.
Britain was a refuge for people escaping the pogroms in Tsarist Russia and Eastern Europe, and so they fled to this country. And it was an open door policy which infuriated the Russians.
Some of them were committing crime, and it was a matter of great concern.
Surprisingly, they could come in with weapons.
Lenin would make London his home in 1908, along with many other Marxists. The huge losses of the Great War were soon to take their toll, and terrible outbreaks of violence and murder were already spreading throughout the capital.
They introduced what they called the Aliens Act to register aliens because of concern about people coming into the country and the fear of crime that some of them would be committing.
In 1909, the Tottenham outrage shocked the city when two Jewish anarchists from the Russian Empire carried out an armed robbery that killed two people, including a police officer, William Tyler. As a result, anti-Semitism and fear of immigration started to ferment. A year later, the Metropolitan Police would be involved in one of the most shocking chapters in its history, the siege of Sydney Street in the Whitechapel area. It all began when another gang of anarchists, this time from Latvia, committed the Houndsditch murders in East London.
Some burglars were breaking into a jeweller's in Houndsditch. City police officers attended, and they were met by this firepower from very powerful weapons. Two police sergeants and one PC were murdered.
Members of the Scots Guards from the Tower of London were sent to assist the police. The situation was so serious that the Home Secretary of the time, Winston Churchill, decided he had to head on over to Sydney Street immediately.
Winston Churchill himself turned up and actually took charge of the operation. There was smoke coming from the windows of the house. By about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the fire had taken hold. Eventually, the roof of the house collapsed, and there was clearly nobody who was going to be alive. And they found the two dead bodies.
At the same time as the Tottenham outrage and the siege of Sydney Street, the suffragette movement was becoming far more militant. And one vicious individual was taking advantage of the position in which many women found themselves. With no vote and limited economic and legal power, women faced gross inequality. Assumptions about their feeble intellect and incomparability with man abounded, even while the suffragette movement was fighting back.
The latter half of the 19th century saw a lot of acts being passed in favour of women's rights, allowing women to keep their own property. allowing them to have their own children, separation from a husband. All of these things came into being. But women were still denied political rights. And the WSPU, the Women's Social and Political Union, led by Mrs. Pankhurst, were the most aggressive of the suffragettes. They started off in a small way, smashing shop windows in Oxford Street. Attacks were carried out on politicians. One of the most famous caught Winston Churchill, who was opposed to women having the vote, and gave him a flogging with a dog whip, which attracted a certain amount of attention.
For most, the only hope of being provided for was in the societal structure that so constrained them: marriage.
By today's standards, women had a rough deal. If they married, then the husband would normally take complete legal possession of their joint property. And so if a young lady had money of her own, then it could be a very difficult position.
So for young girls, the pressure to find a husband before it was too late was acute, as was the ensuing desperation for those older, still unmarried women that society threatened to leave behind. These women were numerous and easy prey for certain men.
One such woman was Margaret Lofty, who in 1914, at the age of 38, had married a mysterious fellow who went by the name of John Lloyd, and who seemed pretty well off.
Margaret had had a hard life, and marriage seemed to have passed her by. So you can imagine her excitement at this late bloom of love. The vulnerable, still heartbroken Margaret fell hard for the rich older man. She hid the relationship from her parents until they were wed. But poor Margaret only lived one night as a married woman. The next day, she was drowned in the bath in the lodgings she took with her new husband.